We're tackling a family dynamic today that hits close to home for a lot of people, I think. It's about what happens when you've got a narcissistic mother in the picture, a father who's emotionally absent, and the son who ends up right in the middle of it all. We want to really dig into how this triangle thing even gets going, what it does to everyone involved, and why it's so important to understand if this is your story or maybe someone you know.
It's a tough one, for sure.
Absolutely. And to guide us through this, we're lucky enough to have an expert who really knows their stuff. We're talking about someone who's not just a psychoanalyst, but also specializes in complex PTSD and trauma-informed therapy. And they've worked extensively with folks dealing with narcissistic abuse and the trauma that comes from that whole world. Welcome to the show. It's great to have you here.
Thanks for having me. This is something I'm really passionate about, so let's get into it.
Okay, so listeners, let's paint a picture here. You've got a family where the mother, she's got these strong narcissistic traits. Then you've got the father, he's emotionally checked out, not really present. And it's the son who often ends up as mom's go-to for emotional support, almost like he's stepping into a husband role, which is pretty wild when you think about it.
It's more common than people realize, and right off the bat, it's crucial that we're clear. This is not about blaming the son. It's not like he's consciously signing up for this. He's been put in this position a lot of times from a super young age, and getting out of that, that's a whole journey.
Totally. You used the phrase emotionally checked out about the dad. What does that actually look like, day to day in a family?
Well, emotional absence, it can show up in a bunch of ways. You might have a dad who's physically there, but he's just not emotionally engaged. Could be avoiding conflict like it's the plague, or maybe he just can't connect with his son on that deeper emotional level, the kind of support a kid needs.
So he's almost like a ghost dad, at least emotionally.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it.
And by doing that, isn't he kind of enabling the whole thing? Even if it's not intentional, if he's not setting boundaries with his wife, letting her be the dominant force, doesn't that just give her more control?
Oh, absolutely. It's like he creates this void, and naturally she's going to step right in and fill it. And that's where the son gets pulled into meeting her emotional needs, which often means his own needs get pushed aside.
Yeah, you're right. It's almost like this messed up love triangle.
In a way, yeah. And the sad thing is, nobody wins in this scenario.
This brings up something one of our listeners asked about. Could it be that the mother's narcissism, maybe it's a reaction to the father's withdrawal in the first place? Or was he always kind of emotionally unavailable, which then led her to seek that connection, but from her son, which is a lot. It's like, which came first, the chicken or the egg?
Right. It's rarely a clean cause and effect situation. We see this a lot in relationships, what we call mutual selection.
Okay, so break that down for us. Mutual selection, what does that mean in this family dynamic we're talking about?
It means that often people find themselves drawn to partners who reinforce patterns they already have, even if those patterns are unhealthy. It's usually happening unconsciously, of course.
So they're drawn to what feels familiar, even if it's messed up.
That's it. So you might have a woman with these narcissistic tendencies who's unconsciously attracted to a man who's emotionally avoidant. Why? Because he's not going to challenge her need for control, her need to be the center of attention. And on the flip side, his emotional unavailability, that's his way of avoiding the vulnerability and intimacy that a narcissistic partner might see as threatening.
So it's like this cycle they get stuck in, they fit together, but in all the wrong ways.
Yeah.
And the son, he's caught right in the middle. And it's not even like the dad is just kind of passively in the background in all this, right? The research you sent, it's almost like the narcissistic mother actually goes out of her way to make sure a father-son bond doesn't happen.
That's a really good point. It's not always just a passive thing. Even when the father is emotionally unavailable, that close father-son relationship, it can still feel dangerous to a narcissistic mother.
See, that's what I don't get. Why would that be threatening to her?
Well, remember, when we're talking about someone with these narcissistic traits, control, that's everything. So a strong bond between father and son, that's a direct challenge to her power,
Even if he's not the most emotionally present dad, she still sees him as competition.
Exactly. Even an emotionally distant dad can be competition for the son's attention, for his loyalty, his affection, all the things she needs to control.
So she's basically jealous of her own son's relationship with his own dad.
You could say that, yeah. She might be afraid of losing her place as the one who has the most influence over her son emotionally. And that fear, combined with all her own insecurities, it can drive her to sabotage the father-son relationship in all kinds of ways, sometimes without even realizing it.
What are some of the things she might do?
Oh, well, one that's really common is She'll put the dad down in front of the son, criticize how he parents, make fun of the things he's into, constantly point out his flaws, even if they're made up.
Just tearing him down.
Right, and it makes the dad look bad, like he
And
doesn't know what he's doing.
so in the son's eyes, his dad's credibility is shot.
Exactly. And it doesn't end there. She might act like she's both the mom and the dad. Make it seem like anything the dad does doesn't really matter.
Wow. Like she's trying to write him out of the story altogether.
That's a good way to put it. And then there's the way she gets in the way of any time the father and son try to have together. Always some kind of scheduling conflict, or she's interrupting their conversations, or guilt-tripping the son into spending time with her instead. It's constant.
Anything else you've seen in your work with families?
Well, this one is kind of sneaky. Psychologists call it triangulation. Basically, she uses communication to pit the father and son against each other.
I think our listeners would need an example to really get that.
Sure. Let's say the father tries to connect with his son. Maybe he gives him some advice, or they're talking about something they both like. Now, a healthy response from the mother would be to support that, right? But instead, she'll twist the father's words around, or tell the son his dad doesn't really mean it. Stuff like, oh, he's just saying that to sound like a good dad.
So like she knows better than the dad what he really means.
Yeah. Or she'll pull the dad aside and be like, he doesn't want to hang out with you. He's too busy. Even if that's not true at all. And all that does is create more distance and resentment between them.
It's like she's this wall that keeps them from having a real relationship.
That's exactly what it is. And the saddest thing is, it usually works. The dad, who's already checked out emotionally, just backs off more, feels like there's no point. And the son, he's stuck in the middle, starting to see his dad the way his mom wants him to see him.
Which is going to mess him up as he gets older, I'm guessing.
Yeah.
How he sees his dad, how he is in a relationship.
Oh, yeah. That's where the real damage shows up.
So we've talked about how this whole thing plays out in the family, but what about, like, the long game? How does growing up like that, with a narcissistic mother, an emotionally MIA father, how does that affect the son down the road as an adult?
Well, think about it. You're a little kid, right? And this messed up version of love and connection, that's all you really know. Those early experiences, they get baked into how you see relationships, period. It might not even be conscious, but you're absorbing those patterns, carrying them with you, whether you want to or not.
Like, he's been programmed to expect these messed up relationships as the norm.
Exactly. And that programming can play out in a few ways. He might, without even realizing it, be drawn to women who remind him of his mother. Controlling, needy, maybe even narcissistic themselves. It's like what feels familiar is also what feels safe, even when it's bad for you.
So he's living out the same story all over again.
Yep. Or, and this is the other side of it, he swings way in the opposite direction, becomes emotionally unavailable himself. It's like he's afraid of turning into his dad, so he just shuts down emotionally, builds these walls up so he won't get hurt.
So it's like he's doomed to repeat things or run from them, but neither way is healthy.
And neither path is going to get him those good, solid relationships he deserves. It's a no-win until he can see those patterns for what they are and break free.
It makes me think of a question we got from another listener. They were asking, is there hope for someone who's been stuck in this family triangle thing? Like, can you actually break out of patterns that are that deep?
I truly believe there is. And that first step, awareness. Seeing those patterns, getting what's really been going on, that's huge. It's not about pointing fingers at your parents. It's about understanding how you got to where you are.
Owning your own story, even the tough parts.
Right. And this is where therapy can be a game changer. It gives you this safe space to work through those experiences, those beliefs you've been carrying around, and start building new patterns that are actually healthy.
Rewriting the script, basically.
Exactly. And it's not a walk in the park. It takes guts, looking inward when it's hard and doing the work. But man, is it worth it. I've seen people completely transform themselves, break free from these dynamics that have been holding them back for years.
Do you have any stories you can share? No names, of course. Just something that shows what that transformation can look like.
I had a patient, this was a few years ago, who could never make a relationship last, always attracted to women who were emotionally closed off, or just plain manipulative, a lot like his mom, actually.
Yeah.
We started working together, and he started to realize, wow, I'm drawn to these women because they feel familiar. They fit into this messed up dynamic I learned growing up.
He was stuck in that loop from his childhood.
Totally. But once he saw it, he could start making different choices, setting boundaries in his relationships, asking for what he needed, and not settling for partners who weren't all in emotionally.
That's so powerful. He broke free.
He did. And it wasn't easy. Took courage, a lot of looking at himself in the mirror, honestly, and sticking with therapy. But it changed his whole life. He found that real healthy love he'd always wanted.
Such a good reminder that it is possible. And that awareness, being willing to look at the hard stuff, that's where it starts.
You got it. You're not alone in this. And it's never, ever too late to break those patterns and build relationships that are good for your soul.
This whole conversation's been amazing, so insightful, and honestly hopeful, even though we're dealing with some really tough stuff. Thank you so much for sharing your expertise with us today.
Happy to be here.
And listeners, if anything we talked about today hit home for you, remember, you are not alone. There is help out there, people who understand these dynamics and resources to support you. Don't be afraid to reach out and ask for what you need. Until next time, keep those questions coming and keep diving deep, even when it's hard.